Okay, good afternoon everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch. Welcome to T2S4, which is transformational learning. Any of you who were expecting T1S4 learning impact, I'm afraid you're in the wrong room. We changed them earlier this morning because of the nature of this session. So if anyone would like to take the opportunity to go and visit Learning Impact, which will be twice as dull as what's going on in here, you have the opportunity now and we won't say anything. My name's Hugh Greenway, I'm your track chair for the afternoon, but I'm not going to tell you anything about me because frankly I'm irrelevant compared to the people who are going to come after me. But before I introduce them, can I ask you all to do me a favour? Can you all please get up? We are doing something intimate, we are doing something different, we're doing something exciting. I'd like you to move towards the front. Can you please gather in an area a bit like this? We will be working with artists, and it's only fair to them that they don't project into an emotional void. Thank you very much. Now, it's my job to introduce this session on creativity and emotion in learning, and more particularly to introduce Ben Hines and his colleague Jamie Treadwell. Ben founded only 2 years ago, Moving Performance, and he's and this newness and enthusiasm he's still very excited about, but he already has clients spread across McKinsey's, Grant Thornton, Northern Rock, so he's clearly doing something very interesting and different. I'm not going to set it up, but you're going to have a delightful afternoon, and I'll hand you over to Ben. Have a great time.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, and welcome to our session this afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. So, my name's Ben Hines, and what struck me about the conference so far is the diversity of what we're hearing. We're hearing from Edward de Bono and his discipline of thinking. And then yesterday afternoon we heard all those extraordinary stats about the development of technology, and then this morning we suddenly hear more about the human side. Well, we're going to come again at a slightly different angle again, so to add something different to the conference, and we hope that you'll get some real value from that. Jamie and myself would like to invite you this afternoon to reflect on how music can make a transformational shift in performance in individuals and teams in organisations. We're going to look at three things. We're going to look at how important it is to consider the emotional as well as the rational in learning, the emotional and the rational. We're going to look at how experiential leads to emotional connection and why that is really important to have a transformative difference in the performance and the output of your learning. And we're also going to look at how metaphor in learning sparks powerful vision for what could be. How metaphor sparks powerful vision for what could be. So, this session is in two parts. The second part of the session, as you may have gathered by looking at what's on stage, is going to be quite different. I think it will be very different from what you've experienced in a conference like this before. We also have a real treat for one person in this room who we'll invite to be our guest with some work that we do with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in March in the Royal Albert Hall. But I'll tell you about that more later. So, I want to start with a story. And it's a story about me. It's a story about how I got into moving performance. In 2004, I was a banker. I worked for a major international bank, and I lived in South Africa at the time. And I had read music at university and had then pursued a career in the financial services. And I was responsible for the development of the products and services for this international bank across Africa. It was a very commercial role, involved knowing a lot about how a bank works, both operationally, financially, strategically, and so on and so forth. Now, in 2004, the top 150 leaders of that organisation got together in one place for a conference. Halfway through the conference, which lasted about 3 or 4 days, they split us up into 6 teams of 25 people. We were asked to write a play about the customer life cycle and we were told to come back and perform it the next day. These groups of 25 people, the play had to be 5 minutes long, and it was competitive exercise. And I went up to the person leading our group and I said, look, I've seen business people trying to act before in a kind of 5-minute play that, especially you've got 25 people coming on stage. At best, it will be funny. At worst, it will be excruciatingly, cringeworthingly embarrassing. And it will undoubtedly be chaotic and will have little impact. I said, rather than doing a play, why don't we all get together and do one thing together? And if we do that, we'll have a huge impact on the conference, and I think we'll win. So the lady looked at me and said, well, what have you got in mind? I said, why don't we sing a song together? On stage, all 25 of us, and we'll sing about the change from really bad customer experience to really good customer experience, which is our topic. So I thought, these guys are from all over Africa. What song are they going to know? And I thought, well, they're pretty religious, the Africans, so I thought they'd probably know Amazing Grace. So the end product, if you like, looked like this. We're on a stage, not too dissimilar to this. The lights all went down. All 25 of us were huddled up like this in a tight ball. In the middle of us, there was this girl from Zimbabwe, and she started to hum in a jazz gospel style the tune to Amazing Grace. It went something like this. Da 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 da. You could hear a pin drop. Then a few of us joined in with some harmony and some finger clicking to get a rhythm going. And then we started to sing 4 verses of Amazing Change. We rewrote the song, called it Amazing Change. The content of the song was very relevant to the conference. People were laughing, they found it amusing, the words. And so we performed our song, and as we performed, this tight ball of people opened up like a flower. The lights came up, arms up in the air. By the end, we were a full gospel choir, absolutely belting it out. 25 bankers, can you imagine? 25 bankers singing a cappella, that means no accompaniment, just pure voice, Amazing Change to their colleagues. Now, the impact was extraordinary. The impact on everyone in the conference was amazing. Many of them were actually moved to tears, which struck me as quite extraordinary. Firstly, I didn't realise bankers were emotional. But actually, they genuinely were moved to tears to see their colleagues perform such a beautiful piece of music. The second thing was the impact on the 25 people who were singing. You see, when I first suggested the idea, 20% of them were up for it. 20% of them were not up for it, most certainly. And 60% of them were kind of on the fence. We'll see which way this goes. At the end of it, all of them were elated by the performance that they had achieved together. They were truly inspired. They had learnt that they could achieve something which they might have thought was impossible beforehand. Because if you think about it, 25 people from your work getting together on stage to sing a song together with no accompaniment might seem an impossible task. Yet they went for it and achieved the impossible. For me personally, I had never done that before. I knew it was theoretically possible to do that. I had learnt about that sort of thing in reading music at university, but I'd never actually done it for real. And I was amazed at what they had achieved together. And it planted in me a seed that if you can get people to do that in the workplace, and the impact that it has on people in the workplace, and how it energises people, and how they realise that they can reach their potential, whatever that might be, by doing an exercise like this, there is a real value to explore in that. So what has this got to do with you and your learning programs and your roles in your organisations? Well, I think it's something to do with this. I think the biggest challenge in organisational change and learning is to get people to want to change. That's the biggest challenge. How do we get people to want to change? And that wanting to change is an emotional challenge, not a rational challenge. Because the rational in these things is actually relatively easy. And you see, what happens is all the organisations that I've worked in or I go around and see, they try and tackle the emotional difficulty with a rational response. So they'll come forward and they'll say, well, the reasons we need to change are X, Y, and Z. That it will be good for you, it'll be good for your career, it's good for our customers, it's good for our shareholders, so on and so forth. It's a very rational response. And people are like, yeah, I get all that, but I don't want to. And why don't they want to? Because they feel something about it, and the organisation doesn't dare to ask them, how do you really feel about that? And the cool thing with music is it evokes emotion. Everyone responds to it, and we're going to listen to some music and test that out. So how do we get people to a place where they really want to change, not just rationally get it? I think the answer is two things. Firstly, we need to make sure we understand how all our people really feel about the change. Secondly, we need to empower our people to look at their context, their own context that they're in, and themselves in a new way. And we're going to look at those 2 points very specifically for the rest of this session. How do we understand all our people really feel about the change? And how do we empower them to look at themselves and their context in a new way? Leonard Bernstein, the American composer, you may have heard of him, Leonard Bernstein, he wrote the West Side Story, and he was a conductor, he was also an educator. He said that the best way to know a thing is in the context of another discipline. The best way to know a thing is in the context of another discipline. And we call that learning through metaphor. Metaphor is, if you like, a different context, and we can get fresh insight on our own context if we look deeply at a different context. And we're going to do that this afternoon, musically. But the first thing I want to do is I want us to listen to some music. And I want you to listen to the music intently. Now, as you came in, you were given a handout. And that handout has got 4 areas, 4 boxes. Actually, you've got 8 boxes, but focus on the first box. We want to play you 4 pieces of music, and we want you to listen to it carefully. We don't want you to worry about the fact that you've probably never done this in a conference before. We don't want you to worry about your colleagues or what your neighbour is writing. It's all about you. We just want you to listen to the music. If you like, shut yourself off from the world around you. Just listen to the music. And look at your heart and think, how is this music genuinely making me feel? Now, for those of you who struggle with understanding your feelings or even knowing what a feeling word is, on the back of the sheet are some feeling adjectives which we hope will trigger and help you. But don't feel you have to use those, you can use your own words. So if you pick up your pieces of paper now, we're going to play you 4 pieces of music. This will last about 5 minutes. There is a 10-second gap between each piece of music, so it's very obvious when we move on to the next track.
My life is brilliant, my love is pure. I saw an angel, of that I'm sure. She smiled at me on the subway. She was with another man, but I won't lose no sleep on that, 'cause I've got a plan. You're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, it's true. I saw your face in a crowded place, and I don't know what to do.
last piece. What we'd like you to do is just turn to your neighbour for 1 minute and just share some of the things you wrote down against each of those tracks. Off you go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we can. The challenge with music is that when we get talking about it, we just want to keep talking about it. So we're just intrigued and curious to hear what you thought. So can I just come down here? Would you just mind just saying what you wrote before the first track?
Okay, I wrote dreamy,
Dreamy.
because I had my eyes closed and it sort of made you feel a bit dreamy. But then, I was thinking because of the words, if somebody was singing that to me, I might feel beautiful,
Yes.
as well. So.
Thank you. Who had something else? Something different from that? Okay, over here.
Mine was happy, hopeful, nostalgic, because it reminded me of a road trip I did from Italy to the UK.
Lovely. Thank you very much. How about you, sir? What did you have?
I just put thoughtful, but I don't know why. I just felt thoughtful.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. And could the second track? Who'd like to comment on the second track? And then we're going to do the third and fourth on this side with Jamie. So, would you like to comment on the second track?
For me, it was dramatic, so I felt in suspense.
So it's just, you felt suspense, and was that a positive? Was that hard?
Oh, very positive. Very positive. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you. What else? What did you have, madam?
I got a bit stressed, alert, and rushed.
Okay, stressed, alert, and rushed. Thank you. Okay, Jamie, how about the third track?
Hey, third track. How do you do it here? Get one here, yes?
Thoughtful and elated because it was moving and haunting.
Thoughtful and elated, great. Great, okay. Got another one in the third. Come back here, we get one over here.
It felt spacious, like a landscape.
Okay. Spacious. That's a familiar tune to a lot of people here.
It must be a film thing.
Exactly right, yeah. Spacious, yeah.
Okay, and the fourth track? So you're dying to add something. You'll keep things sticking out.
That's number 3. It started off peaceful,
Yeah.
and then it turned towards anticipative, and it finished in melancholic acceptance.
Wow.
Wow, that's deep. Cool. Okay, fourth?
It's fascinating. Give a fourth over
Fourth
here.
one, very quickly.
I felt empowered and energised, and that's mainly because I'm used to listening to that kind of track at the gym when I'm exercising.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Which gym?
Yeah.
A gentleman would like to know which gym you go to, so we'll move on.
I got annoyed, irritated, and bored.
Brilliant, okay.
Because I hate that kind of music.
Isn't that fascinating? The same music. Okay.
So
Keep nodding heads.
So what are you noticing here? Differences. And the interesting thing is we can actually experience the same thing, but feel completely differently from each other about it. And the trick in the workplace is that we often miss this, because in a work situation, in a learning situation, with a particular objective we might have for a group of people, we will assume that they will feel and think the same thing. But that's very simple exercise. Music just shows actually people feel very, and at times diametrically opposed, in that fourth track there, to the same thing. And why is that? Well, it's because we're created differently. We're different people. We're different, and it's important to recognise that difference. And when we do so, when we do recognise those differences, and we get people to express themselves emotionally, it's a key stage in onboarding them around change and learning. And when people are onboarded, it will make a huge difference to the output and success of your learning programs and your change programs. So where does music come in to all this? Well, you see, music's the most emotional art form. We hear it, we are exposed to it the whole time. We're exposed to it in football stadiums. Those of you who support football, go along, season ticket holders. It's an awesome experience singing in the crowd in a football stadium. For those of you who love classical music, you'll get inspired going to the concert hall. For those of you who like raving, you will be inspired by your rave music. So we are inspired by music. We're inspired by films as well. The emotional intensity in a film comes absolutely through the music in the film. And because it's so accessible and everyone responds to it, we're finding it a really interesting and powerful way to start to get people to talk about how they genuinely feel about the challenges they face in the workplace. And as they do that, it releases them into embracing change and moving forward. So, the second point we wanted to cover off today was how do we encourage people to look at things in a new perspective? Well, we do that through metaphor. And for the rest of the session, we're going to demonstrate a music metaphor to you and demonstrate how that gives you fresh insight into your own situation. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jamie. I'm going to invite my musical colleagues to come on stage with us now.
That's great. Thank you, Ben. I was fascinated by the change of energy in the room when the music came on. You noticed that, and we talked a bit about it. Also notice how the interaction became very lively between you. The conversation, the insights, and the chance to express some of the things that are important to you. Music is powerful. It cuts to the heart. It stirs emotional responses in us. And it's interesting that for each of us, it's different. And that's okay. One of the things we're interested in is that music actually activates learning centers in the brain. It embeds in memory, and it triggers desire. Those are very, very fascinating things when you put it in the context of learning. Our question today is, how do you harness this now in learning? Related to this is also the questions around creativity. I'm going to refer to actually a quote by De Bono that we've heard, but I think maybe we can bring that on. But creativity involves the breaking out of established patterns. It involves the breaking out of established patterns so that you look at something differently. How do you look at something differently? How do you break out of established patterns? That's what we're interested in today. Now we're going to do this by looking at metaphor. What I'm going to do is express in a few moments here our methodology of working with metaphor in the context of music. And then we're going to go into the workshop. Okay? Now our metaphor today is 5 musicians, a wind quintet. But I want you to think about it today, not so much in terms of the beautiful music they produce, but actually today we're going to be thinking about them as highly skilled professionals, actually with quite a diverse range of expertise, who are coming together in collaboration to produce consistently brilliant performance. We're going to use them as a metaphor here of how they work together. Now, one thing I will point out here is that there's a lot that we can do in this in terms of learning. And we're going to have to focus it down for the sake of time, what we're going to be about today. And some of our projects, we use an entire day with a symphony orchestra. And the learning there is very rich and very deep. It's going to be very rich and very deep here, but in a much more focused way. So I'm going to have us look at one particular aspect I think could be of interest to us today. And that's going to be collaboration in a high-performing team. So that's going to be the question we're going to come to our metaphor with. How does collaboration work in a high-performing team? Okay? Now the framework to help us do that is going to be to think of this team now with they're a team with a strategic advantage, with a competitive advantage. Let's put it that way. And what they've done is they've modeled now a very successful way of communicating and collaborating together. And we're going to come to them and learn from their expertise. We want to find new insights and new ideas for how we work in teams. Okay, so that's how the metaphor is now set up for us. We're going to come to these professionals with the question of highly effective collaboration. What can we learn from that? Okay? I'm going to give you now the methodology that we use, and it's 3 simple steps. We'll bring that up now. First is immersion. The second is observation. And the third then is connection. And we do these in this order. Now in terms of immersion, we're going to give you a special opportunity, at least for some of you, to actually come up on stage. So for immersion, what we're going to do is have you engage the 3 senses: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. and come up very, very close. Now, this is a demonstration, but actually right now, can we have some volunteers? Because you'll experience this in a very special way, but also will help us see it. We have some volunteers who can just come up on stage. Come up and just come around on one of the two sides. We have others, we have room for maybe 10, 5 or 10. If we have a few more come up, please, be great. I'd like you to experience this fully. We call this the immersion, but coming right into the metaphor itself. So you experience it close hands, auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. We have a few on that side and a few over here. Great, thank you very much. The second step you're going to be seeing here today is observation. We are now going to become students of these professionals, and we're going to be watching them. We're going to be learning about their situation. Okay, and Ben's going to be leading us through those exercises. And he's going to be focusing our attention through his questioning. The second one is observation. How much information can we get in the situation and essentially create a fertile field in which ideas, insights can grow. Then the third stage is then the connections. After you've set that field of ideas out there, we come back and look for the connections. And those will happen today for us at the end of the workshop, but also I'm going to suggest to you that this will be a long-lasting impact on you. As you listen to it through these lenses, you're going to be carrying this experience with you. It's going to continue to trigger ideas, vision, and insights that you'll carry with you. But we're going to look at that a bit later on. Okay? So immersion, observation, connection. Over to you, Ben. There we go. We'll introduce the metaphor.
Thank you. So, welcome to the Treadwell Wind Quintet. The wind quintet is made up of the 4 woodwind instruments of the symphony orchestra, namely the flute. Do you want to tootle on the flute? Thank you. And the oboe. Thank you very much. And the bassoon. Which is the lowest instrument in the quintet, and then the clarinet. And then the only brass instrument in the wind quintet is the French horn. And the interesting thing about the wind quintet compared to, say, the string quartet or a brass ensemble is that the instruments of the wind quintet are actually very different from each other. So you have a brass instrument with wood instruments, and brass instrument with woodwind instruments. Woodwind instruments are either played with a reed, or in terms of the flute is blown through. What would you call that on the flute? A mouthpiece?
Yeah, lip plate.
Yeah. Lip plate. So and what that means is the texture of the sound is quite different from each other, whereas the string instrument sounds, the texture is a similar texture, just different pitches. So the challenge that this group have, because if you look at each instrument as a particular expertise, is how do they blend their expertise to produce beautiful music? So the wind quintet are now going to play us some music for a couple of minutes. And for those of you on stage, welcome. If you guys want to come really close, right on their shoulders, okay? And we want to ask you to do 3 things. We want you to notice what you see. Notice what you see. We want you to notice what you hear. And then we want you to notice what you are thinking about them as in their professional capacity as an expert in their own instrument. What are you thinking about them? We're going to ask you for your observations afterwards. Okay? Thank you. So for those of you on stage, I'd just really like for you to share what you saw, what you heard, and what you were thinking. So who would like to volunteer? Thank you.
First of all, thank you. I think it was brilliant. A couple of things I noticed. One, of course, it sounds very soothing to our ears, but it's an act of extreme concentration, extreme harmony and coordination. So I mean, I'm hoping I'll be there someday. One thing I noticed about this lady here is that I couldn't see your face, but I think across the group you were enjoying your music the most, at least what I could feel, because you could see moving around, and then you started off a little this thing, but you started enjoying in the end. So that's the only thing I noticed separately.
Okay.
Apart from that. So.
Thank you.
I found that the timing was all spot on, so you'd obviously been practicing this piece a lot. I also, from hearing it, thought that there were some different tunes, but all blending in together throughout the piece, and then all coming together at different points as well. And I very much enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. We won't be the slow creep of death for those of you.
Alright,
so,
well, what I see is that everybody mastering their own instruments and everybody doing their job, doing whatever that you're playing. And what I hear is the music, and what I see, which is quite interesting, is that you have different scores, like different music pieces. And what I also thought and what I saw was that you looked at your own music, and you kind of sometimes glance at somebody, but then you never really paid attention to what the other person was really doing. But you could just do what your job was. I don't know if that's...
Okay, correct.
Very similar thoughts. I thought you very rarely looked at each other. I think it was intuitive in terms of who was playing, and you seemed to just, it's sort of seamless with no mistakes. I think it was very nice, and I felt part of it as well. So well done, thank you.
This is the slow creep of death, isn't it?
I enjoyed it very much too. I thought you were brilliant. Having played in an orchestra, I do understand why you have the different scores. But actually, I felt the exact opposite. I felt that you were all looking at one another. And actually, it was just because obviously, normally you have a conductor, you didn't need a conductor, you were actually looking at one another. The bassoon I felt was quite serious, actually. I suppose it's got a lot of gravitas, and so I felt you were like the most serious of everybody. But I felt the passion for all of the instruments. So that's, and actually the coordination was just amazing.
Thank you.
And the beauty.
Yeah, I actually agreed with this lady as well. I really got a sense of everybody being patient of each other and really working as a team. And I thought that I was listening to this instrument the most. And if you'd heard it on its own, it probably wouldn't have really sounded very much on its own. But all together as a team, it sounded lovely.
Great.
We are doing a great
Here we are. Do you mind if we just stop there for now? Because I'd love to do the creeping death, but we're short on time. What I'd just like to now ask is to just learn a little bit more about the musicians. So, Hannah, could you just tell me, when did you first start learning the clarinet?
I was 8 years old when I started.
Wow. And how many years, how many, how long do you practice? And to talk about your practicing kind of schedule, how many hours a day have you practiced to get to where you are now?
So it varies. When you're younger, I guess you do less because you have less to work towards. Say half an hour a day, hopefully, if you're committed, and you've got parents pushing you. And then towards my late teens, I started to practice a bit more because I got a bit more serious. So maybe an hour a day, hopefully, when I'm behaving myself. And then now, as I'm a musician professionally, hopefully try and fit in about 2 or 3 hours.
Okay, cool. Do any of you, is that similar for you, or any of you practice for hours and hours a day, in terms of like 6, 7, 8 hours a day? No.
Physically you can't, I mean, especially on our instruments, there's such a toll on your physicality, what your lips, we all use our lips to play.
That's really interesting.
It becomes too much to do that much.
Compared to a stringed instrument or a piano player?
Yeah, I mean, they have limitations as well, but they're with muscles which are used more often in everyday life, whereas you don't really use these muscles for anything else other than playing.
Right.
Our instruments do it,
so it's like you have to keep fit?
Yeah.
You have to stress to keep fit. Being a musician is really, really good. Okay, that's interesting, cool. So tell me about what you use to make a sound.
Okay, so on this instrument, we have a thing called a double reed, which is two pieces of cane, bamboo cane, folded on top of each other, which vibrate together. So it's the noise together, and then that's what vibrates into the instrument, which you heard before. Whereas something like Joe's instrument doesn't have a separate thing. He makes a noise which travels straight through it just with his lips. So it's just two different ways of producing vibrations, which is what make the instruments work.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you notice what the quintet did first before they started to play any music? Tune, absolutely. Why is tuning so important, and why does the oboe tune the quintet? So, if you've got the mic there, Jamie, sorry, can I just ask a quick question? What does the oboe tune?
I think the oboe tunes the quintet because it's got the most direct sound.
Okay.
So it's easy for everyone to log into and hear the pitch.
Right,
And they can
so it
easily
penetrates.
match it. Yeah,
It penetrates. And the oboe actually tunes the whole symphony orchestra as well, because it has that sound which penetrates across everything. So we're going to listen to another piece now, and we're going to do a little experiment to show you why tuning is so important. So we want you to listen to the music now as it should be. Thank you very much. Now we're going to ask two of the instruments to just slightly alter their tuning. Should be the clarinet and bassoon. And they're going to play that same beautiful piece of music again. Let's stop the play. Does that kind of ring bells of school bands? Going to your children's school concerts? Tuning is really, really key. I would like to ask the musicians how that was for them. So could I just ask you, didn't actually play in that, missed you a bit.
I played a little bit at the end, but it's actually just feels very unnatural, and when I did come in, I felt automatically that I had to adjust because something wasn't right, and you hear it, and it's very hard to carry on playing knowing that it's not as it should be.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Well, it just goes against everything you've had knocked out of you in the last, however 10 years or whatever. You're constantly, always listening for tuning to balance with everyone else. So to actually really have to make an effort to it, it's much harder than it. It's not sort of just blowing. You really have to concentrate to make it out of tune. Which is really odd.
So I've heard that tuning gets affected by, for musicians, it gets affected by different environments. So if they're in how is it tuning in this environment here in this conference hall?
It's quite normal in here. It's not really, it's not too hot, not too cold. It's kind of quite average.
So explain how heat changes tuning.
Well, for most of us, when our instruments get hot, they get sharper.
Okay.
And if it's cold, they get flatter. But it also might make some of the notes on your instrument go out of tune with each other as well. It changes temperature.
Wow. So what happens then, in the middle of a concert, playing live, you can't stop and retune the whole orchestra, can you? So how do you retune as you go along, as the room gets hotter or your instrument gets hotter?
We just got to keep listening to each other, and it's just so ingrained in us that it almost happens naturally. You just listen, and you might make an adjustment with your lips or with something that's happening in your throat, or you might just sort of listen and realise that you've gone a bit sharper than everyone else, and you might then alter your instrument to put it back with everyone else.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Jamie, do you want to comment on our process here?
Yeah, just to notice what's happening in terms of the questioning. One of the things that Ben's doing here is drawing our attention to particular areas. His questioning creates focus. And one of the things that we're doing right now is setting this soil of observation. We're just looking into details. Maybe even right now they might not even seem relevant. But I think for the people up here, and well, for you here as well, you're getting more and more into the metaphor now. What's actually going on with these musicians? What's going on when they're interacting together? Again, in the back of our minds is to remind us we're looking at collaboration of high-performing teams. But Ben is using questions now to start drawing out understanding, awareness, and just planting ideas there that we'll look at later.
We're going to do one final exercise now. And we're going to ask the wind quintet we're going to ask each individual of the wind quintet to play their instrument as if they're the most important person. They really want to show off their expertise to everyone around them. Okay? They want to demonstrate and show that they're the best, that they're the one who should be promoted. We want them, and we just want you to experience the impact on the music. So we will continue. So what did you notice was going on there?
I think all of our attention was focused in one particular area.
Right.
And to the detriment of everybody else.
Yeah. And who had the tune in that area? Who had the tune in that particular piece of music? Which instrument was meant to have the tune?
I think the control.
Yeah.
But it was with this lady.
Right. Whilst the French horn had the lyrical tune. Interesting. Great. What were they not doing?
There wasn't much teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
It was more about separation than working collaboratively.
Yeah. And in terms of musicians, Joe, what was not happening from a musical perspective there? Do you want to hold the mic?
Because I'm supposed to have the tune. It didn't. So it's supposed to be led, but as a collective, it wasn't like that at all.
And how did you feel?
Yeah, like I knew we were all supposed to be doing that, but if that happened in real life, I would get pretty annoyed. That's my tune.
That's my tune. I love it. Great. Thank you very much. For those on the stage, if you'd like to take a seat, thank you.
That's great.
So, we've immersed ourselves into a metaphor. We've observed the metaphor. We've got up close and personal to it. We've understood the metaphor in this context in more detail, how a quintet produces high performance. The third step is how we then connect it. What's the so what about this? How does this genuinely make an impact and change in what you do in the workplace? What we'd like you to do is to think of the team that you work in. Think of your team colleagues. Think about the different roles that they'll do. And I want you to now reflect on the 3 exercises we did. The first, where we observed individuals and understood a little bit more about their motivation and their technical skill and their effort at what they do, and the fact that their challenges are slightly different from one instrument to another. The second is where we looked at tuning. Who is your oboe in your team? Where is your oboe? Do you have one? What is A? And that last exercise where it demonstrates the power of balancing your own contribution to those around you. And we want you to think, what insight is this metaphor now speaking to your own context? What ideas are coming up? What are you thinking about your own situation now? Is it giving you clarity? Is it giving more clarity about what the problem has been, or how things could be better, or why it's so good? Is it sparking in the same way that we heard about Debona having a provocation? You know, you provoke something to spark a fresh idea. Is this sparking a fresh idea for you about what could be in your team and in your organisation? This is the power of metaphor in learning. Now, we run this with a whole symphony orchestra, which is awesome, with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And I said earlier we'd like to invite one of you to attend this as our guest in the Royal Albert Hall. So you'll be sitting in the middle of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra on stage in the Royal Albert Hall. Awesome. Okay? So if you'd like to attend that, we'd like you to now, we will pick your names out of the hat, but we want you to hear what this metaphor you've just seen today is saying right into your team and into your situation now. So we've got 5 minutes to do this or so, but Jamie, would you be able to just go around the auditorium with the microphone, and we just want to invite you to say what are you learning about your own situation? Share that amongst everyone here. Hugh will write down your name, and then we'll pull one name out of the hat at the end, and you'll come to the Royal Albert Hall with us in March. Okay? So who'd like to go first? What is this metaphor speaking into your own situation? What have you learned already? Lady at the front here.
You keep track of who is next. Here's your name, please.
Hi, Karen Kimberling from BP. For me, it's saying really, make an effort to appreciate other people's points of view.
Great. Lady back here with the coat.
Hi, Laura Hacker from British Medical Journal. It just made me really think about people's personalities and just a really different way of thinking about different people's personalities and how they might have different learning styles and what they might get from things.
Great, thank you. Gentleman behind
Ian Ellis from the Metropolitan Police. For me, it's everyone in the team has a part to play. They've each got their individual parts to play. They each bring something to the occasion, and it was an experience. Thank you for standing on stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Just move on. Hugh, would we be able to have another microphone rotating on that side? Here it is. Okay.
Hugh Birchard from the Environment Agency. That's made me think that there's almost another sense that you can bring to learning and development.
Okay.
Used to developing it in one specific way with specific tools. This is like opening up a new world and new opportunities.
New world, new opportunity. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, what's your name again? Sorry.
Hugh.
Hugh. Same as was Hugh. Great. Let's have someone this side.
I think for me it's understanding the diversity of my team and helping them to work together as a team and understanding each other's differences.
Right.
As Denise Hudson-Lawson from the Houses of Parliament.
Claire Line from Hogan Lovells. For me, it showed the importance of collaboration and respect for each member of the team.
Interesting. Respect.
Julie Wedgwood from Productive Limited. 4 things really. I think the importance of communication and that clear leadership needs to happen, but with real cooperation across the team. I also think that a very valid point for me is that when one person goes slightly out of sync, when you're looking at the issue of tuning, everybody has to adjust, and that adjusting is actually taking focus off. But that might not actually be observable within the team, and so that's something to watch out for.
Thank you. Yeah, let's go for it. Still got 2 or 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Debbie McNamara from First Group. I think the thing that came through for me is even in a very small team where you may have to wear a number of different hats, there's still an opportunity to work together and listen to each other, even if you're taking on 2 or 3 different roles.
It's interesting. Thank you.
Sorry, Sue Watkins from Smith & Nephew. For me it was around leadership and the fact that there was no recognisable leader. There was nobody telling them what to do. They were all looking at each other and knowing instinctively what to do. And then the music, which was kind of the script or the strategy. So they all had their roles, they all knew exactly what they were doing, and they did it, but it worked out in harmony.
Yes, thank you.
Caroline McCarthy, Lloyds Banking Group. For me, the tuning piece was showing to me that we need to be really clear on what our vision is, so everyone's going in the right direction.
Yes.
From the start.
The question, what is the A, is a key challenge for organisations. How do they tune to that? How does that happen automatically throughout the process of work?
Thank you very much for that. My name's Ian Cumming. I work for the European Training Foundation. We work with 30 countries surrounding the European Union, and they have one thing in common, and that's the common language of music. So I see this would be a wonderful way of bringing together and building teams in our area of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben?
Yeah, Terry should be from S3. What I got out of that was, first of all, the individuals in a team being very competent in what they need to do, being aware of the competencies of others in their team, and knowing what the end goal looks like or sounds like.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we've got time for one more, and then...
There's a gentleman right
there. Jenny Ekblad from Murex. I think that my team actually is very competent, but I think that we missed out the first part of the observation, which was tuning, to get everybody up to speed and knowing what the scores are, that everybody has their particular role to play. And I think that that's most important for me.
Okay, thank you. So Jamie's just going to finish up with a couple of comments on the metaphor, and then the quintet will perform one final piece, and then we'll close. We don't have time for questions today, but we would really like to take your questions right at the end. So if you want to come up and talk to us at the end, I'm very happy to chat to you about that.
Okay, I'd like to just highlight 3 things about learning, because we came here today to learn about learning. Just to highlight these, notice how the key learnings came from you. What we did in the experiential metaphor here is create a context, instead of fruitful area, where your ideas and insights began to flow. Now in our programs, or in other people who could follow up, you now have a context in which to address those issues. In other words, you see desire awakened. I'm now interested in learning about this area. We just mentioned several here. So one of the key powerful tools here is you create a context where the individual discovers their key learning points. A second thing I would highlight is how vision is captured here. It's not directly for your work, but rather a vision of excellence, a vision of brilliant performance. And also having some fun contrasting that with what it doesn't look like. For instance, when we had the soloist claiming the territory when it wasn't their turn to be a soloist. You have some fun with it, but it suddenly becomes very real. And how this can create the vision for really what do we want to be about, what kind of organization or team are we. And thirdly, simply is to highlight how using the metaphor creates a creative context for strategic thinking. And that's what moves you, as De Bono is talking about, something from a fresh perspective now. You break down established patterns, and now you have a fresh territory now to explore ideas. For strategic thinking, you can begin to highlight what do we need to work on. Okay, I just want to highlight those 3 things, very useful tools in learning.
Thank you, Jamie. So to finish, the Treadwell Swing Quintet will now perform a piece by Farkosh, and over to you, and then we'll close our session. Thank you.
Thank you.